I pulled out of the driveway at 9:45 like I do every night. Same routine, same wave, same kiss on the forehead for the kids, same be safe from Danielle, same headlights sweeping across the garage door as I backed into the street. But I didn't go to work. I drove to the end of the block, parked behind the Henderson's RV where nobody could see my truck, and I sat there with the engine off and my hands shaking on the wheel. Then I got out, walked back through the dark, opened the side door of my own garage with the key I'd copied specifically for this purpose, slipped inside, closed the door behind me without a sound, and I went down to the basement. My own basement, the one I'd finished myself 3 years ago. Framed the walls, ran the wiring, hung the drywall. It had a utility closet in the back corner, behind the water heater, where I kept the Christmas decorations and the kids' old car seats. Nobody went back there. Nobody had a reason to. I sat down on an overturned bucket in the dark, and I waited. At 10:32, I heard the front door open. Not a knock, not a ring, a key. Someone letting themselves in the way you let yourself into a place you've been 100 times. And then a voice I recognized down to the syllable because I'd heard it over my fence, at my grill, in my living room every Sunday for 3 years. "Babe, he's gone." Ryan, my next-door neighbor. Danielle's voice from upstairs. "Yeah, left at 9:45, we're good." I heard footsteps cross the living room. I heard them meet. I heard a sound I'm not going to describe to you because some things, once you hear them in your own house, sit in your ears for the rest of your life. I pressed record on my phone. And I stayed in that basement for the next 2 hours and 14 minutes, listening to my marriage end in the house I'd built with my own hands, while my neighbor slept in my bed and my children slept down the hall. If you want to know what I heard on that recording, the line that made me go cold, the name that changed everything, and what I did at the neighborhood block party 3 weeks later, stay with me. Hit subscribe. Because I didn't go upstairs that night. I didn't make a sound, I just gathered. And when I was done gathering, I let 2 neighborhoods watch it all come down.
My name is Marcus Reed. I'm 38 years old, and I'm a shift supervisor at a distribution warehouse outside Columbus, Ohio. I work nights, 5 nights a week, 10 at night to 6 in the morning. I've done it for 11 years. And I'll tell you the truth about working nights that nobody talks about. It isn't the hours that kill you. It's what you miss. Birthday dinners, bedtime stories, the sound of your house settling in the dark. You trade all of it for a paycheck, and you tell yourself the trade is worth it because the people you're doing it for are safe and warm and waiting for you when you get home. I made that trade so Danielle could stay home with our kids, Marcus Jr., who's 9, and Aaliyah, who's 7. She wanted to be there for them. Every morning, every afternoon, every homework session, and every sick day. I wanted that for her, too. So I took the night shift and the night differential, and I built a life around being gone so they could have more. That's the deal I made. And for a long time, it worked. Danielle and I had been married 11 years. We met in our mid-20s, got married fast, had the kids faster. She was warm, funny, the kind of mother who turned every Tuesday into an adventure for the kids. I loved watching her do it. I loved knowing that while I was loading pallets at 2 in the morning, she was home, and they were safe, and the life we were building was real. The signs started about a year ago, and I read them the way you read signs when you don't want to, late and with too much benefit of the doubt. She got distant, not dramatically, in that slow, pulling away way, like someone easing their hand out of yours so gradually you don't notice until the warmth is gone. She started picking fights over nothing. The dishes, the way I loaded the dishwasher, the way I parked. Fights that had no real content, just friction. The kind of friction a person manufactures when they need emotional distance and don't have a legitimate reason for it. She said she needed space. I'm stressed, I have a headache, the kids are wearing me out. I heard those sentences so often they stopped sounding like explanations and started sounding like a recording. She changed how she dressed on the nights I left for work. Nothing dramatic, but I noticed. better jeans, lip gloss, hair down instead of the ponytail she wore all day. Small things. The kind of things you'd notice if you were paying attention and ignore if you trusted someone enough not to. And then there was Ryan. Ryan Gallagher, 40 years old, lived next door, married to a woman named Jenna who worked in pharmaceutical sales and traveled 3, sometimes 4 nights a week. Ryan was the neighbor every family wants. He came to every barbecue. He helped me build the kids' swing set in the backyard, held the crossbar while I drilled it. He borrowed my tools and returned them clean. He was the kind of guy you'd hand your house keys to and never think twice, which is exactly what Danielle did. "I gave Ryan a spare key," she told me one afternoon, casual as anything, "in case of emergencies, if the alarm goes off while you're at work, or if the kids need something and I'm not here." "Makes sense," I said, because it did, at the time. The night I stopped trusting her wasn't dramatic. It was a Wednesday, about 3 weeks before the basement. I came home from my shift at 6:15 in the morning, and something smelled different. Not wrong, different. A cologne that wasn't mine, faint but present, on the couch cushion where I usually sat. I picked it up and held it close, and I knew, the way you know a tool has been moved in your garage without anyone telling you, that somebody had been sitting there. I put the cushion down, I went to bed, and I lay there next to Danielle, who was sleeping peacefully, and I let myself think the thing I'd been refusing to think for months. Then I called a lawyer. Her name was Valerie Stokes, family law, 18 years, the kind of attorney who listens more than she talks and never makes a promise she can't keep.
I told her what I suspected. She didn't flinch. Ohio is a no-fault state for divorce, but adultery is still a fault ground if you choose to file on it, and it absolutely factors into how a court handles property division and spousal support. The evidence matters. Documentation matters. And in Ohio, you can record inside your own home. You own the property, and you have a legitimate interest in knowing what happens inside it, especially with minor children present. So if I set up my phone in the basement and record what happens in my own house while I'm in it, you're a homeowner present in your own residence, monitoring activity around your minor children. That's home security, not wiretapping. Just don't record in a space where a reasonable person would expect privacy. A bathroom, for example. Living room, bedroom, common areas in a home you own, those are defensible. What if they say things I'm not part of? You're in the home. The recording is in the home. Ohio's one-party consent law applies to conversations you're a party to, and home surveillance recordings have been upheld separately. Document everything, and when you have enough, bring it to me. So I built my plan the way I build a pallet stack. Stable, level, one layer at a time. I chose a Tuesday, normal night. I went through the routine exactly the way I always did. Dinner with the kids, bath time, bedtime stories. I kissed Marcus Jr. on the forehead. I braided Aaliyah's hair the way she likes. I told them I loved them and I'd see them in the morning. Then I kissed Danielle. "Be safe," she said, same as always, and something in her voice was already lighter, the way a person sounds when the thing they're waiting for is almost here. I drove away, parked behind the RV, walked back, slipped into the garage, down to the basement, and I waited. The house was quiet for about 45 minutes. I heard Danielle moving around upstairs, checking on the kids, running water, the normal sounds of a house settling down for the night. Then, at 10:32, the front door opened. No knock, no ring, a key. Smooth, practiced, the sound of a man who's done this so many times the lock knows his hand. "Babe, he's gone?" Ryan's voice, clear as a church bell in my own living room. "Yeah, left at 9:45. We're good." Footsteps, a laugh, the sound of a refrigerator opening, my refrigerator, and a beer being cracked, my beer. I pressed record. What I heard over the next 2 hours is something I'll carry with me for the rest of my life.
I'm not going to describe the intimate parts because they're nobody's business and because the sounds that broke me weren't those. The sounds that broke me were worse. The conversation. They talked the way couples talk when they think they're alone. Easy, familiar, intimate in a way that told me this wasn't new, wasn't rushed, wasn't a fling that had gotten out of hand. This was a routine, a relationship, a whole parallel life that started the moment my taillights turned the corner. Ryan said, "You think he suspects anything?" Danielle laughed. "Marcus? No, he's too tired. He comes home at 6, eats, sleeps, and goes back to work. He doesn't even look at me anymore." "What about the weekends?" "I handle the weekends. I just tell him I need space. He thinks I'm stressed. He always thinks I'm stressed." They laughed together at me in my house while my kids slept 20 feet above their heads. And then Ryan said the thing that went through me like a blade. He said, "The night shift ATM. Swipe, deposit, and gone." Danielle laughed harder than she'd laughed at anything I'd said in a year. The night shift ATM. That's what I was. The man who left every night so they could use his house, his bed, his beer, and his paycheck, and who came home every morning too exhausted to notice the pillow was still warm on the wrong side. I sat in that basement and I held my phone and I did the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I stayed quiet. I didn't go upstairs. I didn't put Ryan through the wall he'd helped me drywall. I sat on that bucket, in the dark, and I let the recording run, because the man upstairs wanted to call me an ATM, and the woman upstairs wanted to laugh, and in 3 weeks, neither one of them was going to laugh.
Ryan left at 12:47. I heard the front door close. I heard the lock turn. My lock, with his key. I heard Danielle go upstairs, and I heard my bedroom door shut, and I heard the house go quiet. I stayed in the basement until 5:30. Then I slipped out the garage, walked to my truck, drove to the warehouse parking lot, and walked in at 5:59 like I was finishing my shift. Nobody knew. I went home. Danielle was making the kids breakfast. She smiled at me. "Long night?" "Always," I said. I ate breakfast across from her and I didn't flinch. 11 years of marriage and I still had that in me. The ability to hold my face steady while everything behind it was on fire. I did it 3 more times over the next 2 weeks. Tuesday, Thursday, Tuesday again. Same routine, same parking spot, same basement, same recordings. The pattern was identical every time. Ryan arrived within 30 minutes of my departure. He stayed 2 to 3 hours. They talked, they joked, they used my house like it was theirs, and every night the conversation gave me more. On the second recording, Danielle told Ryan she was thinking about pushing for a divorce. "I just need to figure out the money," she said. "If I file first, I get the house, the kids stay with me, Marcus pays support, it's clean." She'd been strategizing, planning her exit, timing it to maximize what she'd walk away with, and she was doing it in my living room, on my couch, with my neighbor, while I was supposedly at work earning the money she was planning to take. On the third recording, something changed. Danielle mentioned a name. "Jenna already suspects something," she said. Jenna, Ryan's wife. "She asked me why I was over here last week," Ryan said, voice tighter now. "I told her I was checking on a noise Danielle heard. She didn't buy it." "What are you going to do?" "Handle it. She's gone 4 nights a week. She doesn't know anything concrete." Except she did. I found Jenna's number through a mutual friend. I called her from the warehouse parking lot on a Wednesday morning. "Hey, Jenna, this is Marcus from next door." "Hey, Marcus, everything okay?" "Not really. Can we talk? In person, somewhere private."
We met at a diner off Route 33. She showed up with a folder. A folder. "How long have you known?" I asked. 6 weeks, she said.
She opened the folder. Bank statements, phone records, a timeline she'd built on her own. I started noticing about 2 months ago, the way he talked about your wife, the way he showered before bed when he hadn't been anywhere. I hired someone to look into it quietly, and once I had enough, I called a lawyer. She was ahead of me. I know about the recordings, I said, not to test her, to show her I was serious. What recordings? I told her. The basement, the conversations, the night shift ATM, the discussions about divorce strategy. Her face didn't change. She just nodded slowly, the way a person nods when the thing they were afraid of turns out to be exactly as bad as they thought. They're planning to leave us, both of them, and take as much as they can when they go. Not if we move first. She looked at me across that diner table, two people who'd been on opposite sides of the same lie, and she said, "The block party is in 3 weeks." I know. She wants to do it there. I thought about it. The annual neighborhood block party, 50, 60 people, both families, all the neighbors who'd watched Ryan help me build that swing set, all the friends who'd sat at our table and toasted our anniversary. "Are you sure?" I asked. "They've been doing this in front of everyone," Jenna said. "At every barbecue, every holiday, every Sunday in your living room. They performed their friendship for the whole neighborhood while they were sleeping together in your bed. I think the whole neighborhood should see what was underneath the performance." I couldn't argue with that. Over the next 3 weeks, we coordinated. Valerie drew up my custody filing. Jenna's attorney, a woman she described as the sharpest knife in Franklin County, prepared her divorce papers. We timed everything to land on the same day, at the same event, so neither of them would have time to spin a story before the truth was already out.
I went through my recordings and pulled one clip. Not the intimate sounds. I'd never play those, and Valerie had advised against it for legal and moral reasons. The clip I chose was 90 seconds long. It was Ryan and Danielle in my living room laughing about my schedule. The night shift ATM, swipe, deposit, and gone. And Danielle, "He doesn't even look at me anymore. He comes home, eats, sleeps, goes back." And Ryan, "As long as he keeps clocking in, we're good." 90 seconds, their own voices, in my house, laughing at the man who built the walls they were hiding behind. The block party was on a Saturday in late summer. Tables on the cul-de-sac, kids on bikes, coolers and folding chairs, and somebody's Bluetooth speaker playing 90s hip-hop. The kind of afternoon that looks like a postcard for the suburban American dream. Ryan was at the grill, my grill, the one he'd borrowed for the event. Danielle was at a table with 2 other women, holding a drink, laughing, the perfect picture of the happy wife and mother. I waited until the eating was done and the crowd was settled. Then I walked to the center of the cul-de-sac where somebody had set up a little speaker stand for the music, and I unplugged the Bluetooth. "Hey everybody," I said, "can I have your attention for a second?" The crowd quieted. 60 faces, neighbors, friends, the people who'd waved at me and Danielle for a decade. Most of you know I work nights, 5 nights a week, 10 to 6. I've done it for 11 years so my kids could have their mom at home. I'm proud of that. I've never complained about it. Ryan was watching me from the grill. Danielle had set her drink down. "About 3 weeks ago," I continued, "I started coming home a little differently. I'd drive away like normal, but then I'd park around the corner and come back inside, through the garage, down to the basement." I kept my voice steady. I wanted to know what was happening in my house after I left. The cul-de-sac went dead quiet. I found out. I pulled out my phone and played the clip. Ryan's voice, clear and bright in the late afternoon air. The night shift ATM, swipe, deposit, and gone. Danielle's laugh. Ryan again. "As long as he keeps clocking in, we're good."
90 seconds. Every word audible,
every syllable recognizable to every person in that circle because they'd all heard those two voices at 100 barbecues, 100 Sunday afternoons, 100 "Hey neighbor" waves across the fence. When the clip ended, nobody moved. Ryan's face had gone the color of ash. Danielle's hands were over her mouth. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse. I just said, "That's my wife and my next-door neighbor in my living room, in my house, while my kids slept down the hall and I was at work earning the money they're planning to split in a divorce." Then Jenna stepped forward. She'd been standing at the edge of the crowd, quiet, holding an envelope. She walked up to Ryan, her husband, the father of her children, the man she'd trusted, and she held the envelope out. "Divorce papers," she said, "signed by my attorney this morning." Ryan's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Jenna looked at Danielle. "You can have him," she said. "I'm done sharing." I turned to Danielle and set a second envelope on the table in front of her. "Custody filing," I said. "My lawyer submitted it yesterday. I'm requesting primary custody of Marcus Jr. and Aaliyah based on my role as primary provider and the documented pattern of adultery in our home with our children present." Danielle looked up at me, mascara already running. "Marcus, you can't—" "I can," I said, "and I already did." I picked up my empty plate, threw it in the trash, and walked back to my house. Behind me, the block party was over. Not because anyone announced it, because nobody could look at each other. Here's what happened after, and none of it was loud, because I'd already said the only thing needing saying. The custody case went the way Valerie said it would. Danielle tried to fight, argued I worked too many hours to be the primary parent. Valerie countered with 11 years of documentation showing I'd structured my entire career around being available for my kids. Morning routines, school drop-offs, weekend activities, every parent-teacher conference. The recordings showed Danielle inviting a man into the marital home while the children were sleeping, and the court weighed that heavily.
I got primary custody. Danielle got a standard visitation schedule. The house went to me. I'd paid every mortgage payment for 11 years, and the marital home was where the children's stability lived. No spousal support. Valerie argued that Danielle had been a willing participant in a plan to divorce me and take the assets, documented in her own voice on her own couch. The judge was not sympathetic. Ryan's world came down faster. Jenna had been building her case for weeks before I even called her, and her evidence was surgical. Financial records, phone logs, a timeline that matched mine beat for beat from the other side of the same wall. She took the house. She took primary custody of their kids. And Ryan, the man who'd called me the night shift ATM, got to learn what it felt like to swipe and come up empty. He put his house on the market within a month, moved to an apartment across town. Danielle followed him there for a while. Last I heard, that lasted about 4 months before the relationship that had thrived on secrecy discovered it couldn't survive daylight. Jenna and I stayed in touch, not romantically, I want to be clear about that, because people always assume, and they're wrong. What we had was simpler and in some ways stronger. We were two people who'd been on opposite sides of the same betrayal, who'd chosen strategy over fury, and who'd walked through the ugliest day of their lives standing next to the one other person who fully understood what it cost. She called me one evening about 6 months after the block party. "How are the kids?" she asked. "Good. Marcus Jr. is pitching this season. Aaliyah made honor roll." "That's great." A pause. "Are you okay? Like, actually okay?" I thought about it. "I'm getting there. Some nights I still sit in the basement and just sit, not to listen, just because it's quiet down there, and quiet used to scare me, and now it doesn't." "Yeah," she said. "I know that feeling." "Jenna?" "Yeah?" "Thank you. For the diner. For the folder. For being ahead of me. You'd have gotten there. Maybe. But you made sure I didn't get there alone."
A year after the block party, I took a job at a distribution center in a new city. Better hours, Days now, not nights. I moved the kids. New school, new house, new street where nobody knew our story, and nobody would ever call their father the night shift ATM. The first night in the new place, I tucked Marcus Jr. into his new bed. "Dad?" "Yeah, buddy?" "Are you going to work tonight?" "No," I said. "I'm going to be right here." He smiled. "Good." Aaliyah was already asleep in the next room. I stood in the hallway between their doors, the way I used to stand in the old house, listening to them breathe. Same sound, same steady, trusting rhythm. Two kids who knew all the way down to the bottom of their hearts that their father was home. I went downstairs, sat on the couch, my couch, in my house, in a living room where nobody had ever laughed at me behind my back. And for the first time in a year, the quiet felt like mine. People ask me if the block party was too much. I thought about it, and here's what I come back to. They did it in front of everyone, every barbecue, every Sunday, every wave across the fence. They performed their friendship, their innocence, their neighborliness for an audience of 60 people who trusted them, while they mocked me in my own living room and slept in my bed and planned to take my children and my money and leave me with nothing but a time clock and an empty house. I didn't humiliate them. I gave the audience the truth, the same audience they'd been lying to for 8 months, and I let the audience decide what to do with it. That's not revenge, that's transparency. They chose the stage, I just turned the lights on. If you've ever been called someone's ATM and you proved them wrong by being the last man standing, comment, "I clocked out." I read every one. And if this story hit you where you live, subscribe and stay with me, because the next one is even colder.